It was 2 in the morning when I woke up thirsty. My heart tingled unpleasantly, a sure sign that in the morning Lorraine would be shaking her head again and checking my pulse with that peculiar expression on her face that I hated. The expression of a nurse used to hopeless patients. I sat up slowly on the bed, writhing against the pain in my joints. My body, this miserable 71-year-old bag of bones, betrayed me every day. That's why I'd ended up here 6 months ago, at my daughter's house, in the small room that used to be Floyd's office. The smell of tobacco had embedded itself in the walls, and even after the renovations, its light trail could be smelled on sweltering nights. The house was silent, the kitchen clock ticking and the refrigerator humming. I fumbled for my slippers, a gift from my grandchildren last Christmas. They were cheap, bought on sale, with the soles already peeling off. "They're just slippers, Grandpa. What do you want?" said Derek, my 14-year-old grandson, when I carelessly twirled the gift in my hands. Lorraine then gave me a look that clearly said, "Don't you dare hurt a child." A child. I hummed, slowly heading for the door. Derek is already half a head taller than me and stealing cigarettes from Floyd's jacket, thinking no one notices. An 11-year-old Paige spends hours in front of the mirror experimenting with Lorraine's makeup. They both look through me like through a ghost. A grandfather who is too old to be interesting and too burdensome to be loved. I carefully opened the bedroom door, trying not to creak. This house had always felt foreign to me. In my old house, which now stood empty on the other side of town, every floorboard remembered my footsteps. Here I was an intruder, even though Lorraine claimed otherwise. "Daddy, you can't live alone after what happened," she'd said after my heart attack. There was concern in her voice, but her eyes were cold. "You have serious heart problems, and I'm a nurse. I'll be able to look after you." "Look after," I shuddered. Watching is when you peek into my room 5 times a day, checking to see if I'm still alive. When you put my pills in the organizer, not letting me control my own medication. When you tell me off for daring to go to the corner store on my own. Once in the kitchen, I poured myself some water. My hands were shaking and a few drops spilled onto the countertop. I hastily wiped them off with the sleeve of my pajamas. Lorraine didn't like clutter. She'd inherited it from Elizabeth, my late wife. But whereas Elizabeth's love of order was a gentle admonition, Lorraine's had turned into despotism. Elizabeth. I felt a familiar emptiness in my chest at the thought of her. 3 years had passed, and I still woke up at night reaching out to her side of the bed. 47 years together. And then cancer took her in 6 months, and the world lost its colors. Finishing my water, I was about to head back to my room when I heard muffled voices from the living room. The ajar door let in a streak of light. I froze. I wasn't the only one who often suffered from insomnia. Floyd liked to have a drink before bed, especially on Fridays when he didn't have to take the kids on the school bus in the morning. But now it was Wednesday, and I could clearly hear not only his voice but Lorraine's as well. "We're not going to last much longer like this," Floyd was saying. There was irritation in his voice. The last warning from the bank came through. 2 more delinquencies and they'll start the procedure. "I know," Lorraine's voice sounded tired. "But what are you suggesting? I can't work any harder than I am now. I've got 2 stints as it is." "Your father's house is the solution," Floyd said, and something in his tone made me tense up. "It's empty, and we're here paying off these damn loans. If we sold it—" "Floyd, we talked about this. Dad would never agree to it. This house is all he has left." "He'd agree if he wasn't such a stubborn old man. Hell, Lori, we do everything for him. He lives with us, eats our food, takes up a room. And what do we get in return? His pathetic pension that barely covers his own medicine." I stood frozen at the kitchen door. His words stung like acid. So that's how they see me. A burden, an extra mouth. I'd offered to pay for the room, but Lorraine had refused, saying it was insulting. Now I understood why. My miserable pension was going into their pockets anyway. And what do you suggest? A note of steel appeared in Lorraine's voice. Put him out on the street? There was a pause, and I felt a chill run down my spine. No, baby. I say, get rid of the old man. I nearly dropped the glass. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from giving myself away with a sigh. What are you talking about? Lorraine whispered, but there was no shock in her voice, more like wariness. Listen. Floyd's voice grew quieter, and I carefully took a step closer to the door so I could hear better. Your father is sick. His heart is going nowhere. One good attack and that's it. Natural death, no questions asked. You said yourself he lives on pills. Floyd, are you crazy? That's my father. The father who barely noticed you while your mother was alive? Who missed your graduation because of work? Who even managed to pick a fight with all your friends at our wedding? My heart clenched painfully. All those old grudges, all the mistakes. I wasn't the perfect father, it was true. Worked too hard, been too strict. Tried to patch things up after Elizabeth died, but apparently it was too late. It doesn't matter, Lorraine replied, but her voice trembled. What you're suggesting is murder. Not if no one finds out, Floyd insisted. You have access to drugs at the hospital. Something that will cause a heart attack but leave no trace. He'll die in his sleep, painlessly. You'll be there, do the right thing, call an ambulance when it's too late. No one will suspect a nurse with 20 years' experience. There was silence, a long, terrible silence. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, threatening to give me away with an attack right there at the door. I can't, Floyd. It's wrong. And the fact that we're going to lose the house because of the loans is right? And that the kids are going to be homeless is right? Lori, your father won't last long anyway. We'll just hasten the inevitable and solve our problems. Silence again. I could barely breathe. If only he'd agreed to sell that house, Lorraine said quietly. He won't agree. You know that yourself. He's clinging to it like your mother still lives there. That house is standing empty, falling apart, and it could have saved us. Derek and Paige. They won't understand if we lose the house. They won't have to understand if we do it right. Your father's house is worth enough to pay off our debts and start with a clean slate. No more delinquencies, no more fear of opening a letter from the bank. I heard a sob. Was my daughter crying? Or was it relief? How do you want to do this? Horror gripped me with renewed intensity. She was agreeing. My own daughter was discussing killing me. There are drugs that mimic a heart attack. You probably know those. We'll put it in his meds. Wait until nighttime. And then he won't wake up, Lorraine finished for him. Her voice sounded oddly detached. I can get digoxin. Too high a dose will cause cardiac arrest. His doctor won't be surprised, given his medical history. The glass still slipped from my fingers and fell to the linoleum with a thud. The voices in the living room quieted momentarily. What is it? I heard Floyd's worried voice. Dad must have woken up, Lorraine replied. I'll check it out. I had a few seconds. Panic swept over me in a wave. If they realize what I've heard, that I know, they won't wait. They'll do it today. I rushed toward my room, forgetting the pain in my joints, the pressing weight in my chest. My heart was pounding like a madman, and my eyes were a blur of black spots. All that was missing was dying of a heart attack right now, saving them the trouble. Dad? Lorraine's voice came from the hallway. Are you awake? I locked myself in my room and pressed my back against the door, trying to regain my breath. What to do? Call the police? And what would I say? Hello, my daughter and son-in-law are planning to kill me? Without proof, it would sound like the ramblings of a senile old man out of his mind. Dad? Lorraine knocked on the door. Are you okay? Her concern. Her damn fake concern. I clenched my fists. Yeah, I answered, trying to make my voice sound sleepy. Just went to the bathroom. Laying down now. Are you sure you're okay? Did you take your evening meds? Yeah, I'm fine. I tried to keep my voice from shaking. Good night, Lorraine. Good night, Dad. I heard her footsteps retreating down the hallway, and only then did I let myself slide to the floor. I was shaking. My own daughter, flesh of my flesh. She and Floyd wanted to kill me. Kill me for money. For the house I'd lived in for 40 years, where every corner held the memory of Elizabeth. My mind was racing frantically. In the morning, they'll realize I heard everything. In my eyes, in my demeanor. I've never been good at hiding my emotions, Elizabeth always said so, and Lorraine knows me too well, and then they'll have no choice. They'll do it quickly, maybe even tonight. I looked around. I have to run, right now, in the middle of the night. The room was silent, only the ticking of the alarm clock counting down the seconds of my remaining life. Acting with feverish haste, I pulled an old gym bag out of the closet. I threw in a change of underwear, a sweater, and socks. With trembling hands, I pulled out my documents and wallet from the nightstand. I found an envelope of cash at the bottom of the drawer. I always kept some money for a rainy day. Apparently, it was coming. Changing into jeans and a shirt, I threw on an old raincoat. It's February outside, it's cold, but better to freeze out there than die here at the hands of my own daughter. Putting on my boots, I cautiously opened the window. Fortunately, my room was on the first floor, and there were only lilac bushes below the window. Taking one last listen and making sure the house was quiet, I threw my leg over the sill. My old joints ached with protest, but the adrenaline dulled the pain. The cold night air hit my face when I was finally outside. My heart was still racing, threatening to fail me at any moment. I couldn't let myself die now, not like this, not by letting them win. Slowly, trying not to make any noise, I made my way across the backyard to the wicket. It creaked open, and I froze, expecting a light to come on in the house for someone to call my name. But nothing happened. The street was deserted. The streetlights cast yellow circles on the asphalt. Where to go? I had no friends in the neighborhood. Everyone I knew lived near my old house on the other side of town. I moved forward just to get away from Lorraine and Floyd's house. Each step was hard. The cold air stung my lungs, but fear drove me forward, fear and the bitterness of betrayal. Get rid of the old man, I heard in my ears. I had become just an old man to them, a burden, an obstacle to solving their financial problems. I was walking down Federal Way at night, a gray-haired old man with a bag running away from my own daughter's house. Walking to save my life. Walking not knowing where or to whom. But he knew exactly what he was running from. His own people who had turned into strangers. Blood that had been poisoned by greed. Their plan will fall apart tomorrow when they discover my disappearance. They won't be able to kill me if they don't find me. And I'll make sure they never find me. Even if I have to start a new life at 71, somewhere in the back of my mind I hoped this was a nightmare. That I'd wake up in my bed in the morning and Lorraine would bring me oatmeal and pills as usual. But the cold wind hitting my face said otherwise. This was reality. A terrible, cruel reality in which my own daughter wanted me dead. The cold crept under my old cloak with every step. The February night at Federal Way was merciless to the elderly fugitive. I walked, clutching my worn gym bag in my hand, and every breath I took hurt in my chest. Strange how quickly life changes. 3 hours ago I was asleep in my bed, and now I was wandering the deserted streets, fleeing from my own children. My heart was working at its limit. Too fast for someone with my diagnosis. Too dangerous. I stopped under a streetlight trying to catch my breath. With trembling fingers, I unzipped my bag and pulled out a small plastic box of pills. Lorraine always insisted I carry them with me. Just in case, Dad. Now that precaution was saving my life. I swallowed the nitroglycerin, leaning against the pole. The cold metal burned even through the fabric of my cloak. My legs, with aching joints and swelling that had failed me constantly in recent years, now protested with every step. The shortness of breath was getting worse. I wasn't ready for a marathon like this. Federal Way was asleep. Rare cars drove by, oblivious to the elderly man standing alone under a streetlight. Who cares about other people's problems? People don't notice old people. We become invisible somewhere after 60, especially to young people who look right through us as if we were already ghosts. When my heartbeat calmed down a bit, I continued on my way. I needed to get to the other end of town, where my old house was and where Garth Tower, my former neighbor, lived. The only person I could turn to at this hour. The buses were out of service at this hour. Cabs? I had money in an envelope, but calling a cab meant leaving a trail. If Lorraine and Floyd started looking for me, they could easily check out the cab services. No, I'd better walk, at least part of the way. Then maybe I could hitch a ride or wait for the first buses of the morning. I walked slowly through the sleeping city, and each block became more and more difficult. My feet were numb from the cold, and my fingers could barely feel the handle of my bag. My breath came out in clouds of vapor in the frosty air. If Elizabeth could see me now, what would she say? She'd probably scold me for being reckless. And then she'd take my hand and walk beside me as she always did. At the crossroads, I stopped, trying to get my bearings. When I was young, I knew this town like the back of my hand. A lot had changed now. There were new neighborhoods, old buildings giving way to modern complexes. The city grew and changed, and I stayed the same. Obsolete. Unnecessary. Suddenly I felt dizzy. I staggered and grabbed the nearest support, a mailbox it turned out. Black spots swam before my eyes. Not now, I begged. Not a heart attack in the middle of the street. Don't let them win so easily, Whitmore. I took a few deep breaths like the cardiologist taught me, concentrated on my breathing, trying to calm my pulse. Gradually, the dizziness receded. But I knew I couldn't last much longer like this. I needed shelter, warmth, rest. Across the street, the sign for a convenience store glowed. This was a chance. I crossed the street slowly, writhing against the pain in my knees, and pushed open the store's door. Warm air blew across my face. A young guy with headphones was dozing behind the counter. He looked up lazily when the doorbell jingled and ducked back into his phone. No interest in the elderly customer. I walked between the shelves, pretending to look at the merchandise. In reality, I just needed to warm up and gather my thoughts. Taking a bottle of water from the shelf, I headed for the cash register. "It's cold today," I said, holding out the money. The guy shrugged, keeping his headphones on. "Uh-huh. Can you tell me when the first buses start running?" He grudgingly pulled out one earpiece. 5:30, I think. Number 20. The stop is around the corner." I nodded gratefully. 5:30. A few more hours of waiting, but it was better than walking across town. "Thank you. Can I just sit here for a while? Warm up?" The guy gave me an appraising look. I must have looked pathetic. An old man with red cheeks and a tattered bag. "Only if you buy something else," he said without much enthusiasm. "The boss doesn't like bums sitting here." I didn't explain that I wasn't a bum. Instead, I bought a pack of cookies and a cup of instant coffee from the machine. The guy nodded at the table by the window, and I sank down on the plastic chair with relief. The hot coffee warmed my hands. I looked out the window at the empty street and thought about how I'd gotten to this point in my life. 71 years old. Almost a lifetime behind me. And here I am sitting in a convenience store, running away from my own children who want to kill me. Time stretched agonizingly slow. I dozed off, waking up at every sound. Finally, it started to get light outside the window. The clock on the wall read 5 in the morning. It was time to move on. I thanked the cashier, who didn't even seem to notice I was still here, and walked outside. Dawn was coloring the sky a pale pink. It was getting a little warmer, or maybe my body was just coming to terms with the cold. The bus stop was empty. I sat down on a bench holding my bag tightly. There's no one to steal from this early, but the habit of not trusting those around me was deeply ingrained. Elizabeth always said I was too suspicious. Well, now that suspicion could save my life. The bus arrived right on schedule. The driver, a tired, middle-aged man, gave me an indifferent look as I held out the money for my ticket. I was just another early passenger to him, invisible. The interior of the bus was almost empty. Only at the very back was a woman in a maid's uniform dozing, probably on her way to a morning shift at some hotel. I sat by the window, clutching my bag to me. The bus moved off, and I watched the familiar streets float by. Somewhere out there, in their house, Lorraine and Floyd might have already discovered my disappearance. What would they do? Will they look for me? Would they notify the police? 40 minutes later, I got off at the right stop. It was only 2 blocks from here to Garth's house. My legs felt better after resting on the bus, and I walked faster than I had the night before. The neighborhood was painfully familiar. This was where I'd lived most of my life. Here, Elizabeth and I had raised Lorraine. Here we'd made plans for a future that was now gone. Garth's house looked exactly as I remembered it. A small one-story house with a green roof and a white picket fence. Garth had always been proud of his garden, but now, in February, the garden was bare and lifeless. I stopped hesitantly at the gate. 6:30 in the morning. Too early for a visit, but there was no choice. Gathering my courage, I pushed open the wicket and went to the door. The bell rang somewhere in the back of the house. I waited, shifting from foot to foot with cold and nervousness. What would I tell Garth? How would I explain my showing up this early? The truth. Who would believe such a wild story? A moment later, footsteps sounded outside the door. The lock clicked, and Garth Tower, my neighbor for 30 years, appeared on the threshold. He had aged a great deal since the last time I'd seen him. His hair was completely gray, his face wrinkled, but his eyes remained the same, clear and attentive. Whitmore. The surprise in his voice was genuine. What the hell are you doing here so early? Garth, my voice shook. I'm sorry to bother you. I need help. He stared at me for a few seconds, then stepped aside. Come on in. You look lousy. I gratefully stepped over the threshold. The house was warm and smelled of coffee. Garth was probably already up and making breakfast. Come into the kitchen, he said, closing the door. I just put the coffee pot on. I walked down the familiar hallway. Garth's house hadn't changed much over the years. Same pictures on the walls, same worn carpets. After his wife Margaret died, he'd lived alone, just as I had after Elizabeth left. Only he was luckier. His children lived in other states and couldn't control his every move. In the kitchen, Garth pointed me to a chair and silently poured coffee into 2 cups. He put one in front of me and sat down across from me. So, tell me, he said, looking at me carefully. What happened? I wrapped my hands around the cup, savoring the warmth. Where to begin? How do I explain the horror of what happened? Lorraine and Floyd want to kill me, I said bluntly. There was no point in beating around the bush. Garth blinked. His hand holding the cup froze halfway to his mouth. What? I overheard them talking last night. They're planning to put something in my medication, something that'll give me a heart attack. They want to sell my house to pay off my loans. Garth set the cup down slowly. His face reflected concern, but not shock. More like doubt. Whitmore, are you sure you've got this right? Are you dreaming? No, I shook my head. I heard them with my own ears. Floyd said, we've got to get rid of the old man. And Lorraine, my own daughter, she agreed, said she could get some drug at the hospital. Garth rubbed his chin. I could see he didn't believe me. And who would? The story sounded like the ramblings of a paranoid person. Listen, he began cautiously. I know it's been hard for you since Elizabeth died. And moving in with Lorraine, it's a big change. Sometimes in situations like this, we feel... I don't. I raised my voice and my heart immediately resonated with a sharp pain. Damn it, Garth. I'm not out of my mind. I heard them talking. They were discussing how to put something in my medication. Lorraine said digoxin. She's a nurse. She knows how to make it look natural. Garth raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. All right, all right. Let's not get heated. Tell me everything in order. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Then I detailed how I'd woken up in the night, how I'd heard them talking in the living room, what they'd said. Garth listened in silence, not interrupting. When I finished, he stared at his cup for a long time, as if searching it for answers. "This is a serious accusation, Whitmore," he said at last. "You realize that without proof." "I know," I rubbed my eyes tiredly. "That's why I didn't go to the police. Who's going to believe an old man accusing his nurse daughter of attempted murder? They'll say I'm out of my mind, or that it was a side effect of the medication." Garth nodded. He understood the situation as well as I did. "What do you plan to do?" I shrugged. I didn't really have a plan. I was just running for my life. "I don't know. I need somewhere to wait it out, to think. Maybe find a way to prove their intentions." Garth tapped his fingers on the table thoughtfully. "You could stay here for a few days," he said finally. "I have a guest room. But then we'll have to decide something. If what you say is true, it's true, Garth." I looked him straight in the eye. "I swear on my life." He sighed. "Good. I believe you. Or at least I'm trying to believe you. But we need proof if you're going to do anything about it." "What kind of proof?" I spread my hands. "Record their conversation? Make them confess?" "I don't know," Garth answered honestly. "But we'll figure something out. In the meantime, you should get some rest. You look exhausted." He was right. The fatigue was weighing down on me. The night without sleep, the stress, the physical exertion, it was all too much for my old heart. Garth showed me to the guest room. It was small but cozy. The bed was made up with fresh linens and there was a glass of water on the nightstand. "Rest," Garth said, leaving me alone. "We'll talk later." I sat down on the bed, suddenly feeling the weight of what had happened. My daughter wanted me dead. How had it come to this? Where had I made a mistake in raising her? Or was it Floyd who was manipulating her? Thoughts swirled around in my head, giving me no rest. But fatigue took its toll, and I lay down without undressing. The last thing I thought about before falling asleep was, would they find me here? And what would happen if they did? I woke up to the sound of the television. It was dark in the room. The curtains were drawn, but I could tell by the streak of light under the door that it was daytime. The clock on the nightstand read 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I had slept for almost 8 hours. Getting out of bed, I felt every muscle aching. The night's walk had not gone without a trace on my old body. I listened to my heart. It was beating steady, without interruptions. A good sign. After washing up in the small bathroom, I went out into the living room. Garth was sitting in a chair in front of the TV watching the news. "Oh, you're awake," he said when he saw me. "How are you feeling?" "I've been better," I said honestly, sinking down onto the couch. "But I'm alive, and that's what matters." Garth nodded and pointed to the TV. "Watch." There was a local news program on the screen, and I was horrified to see my picture. Underneath it ran the line, "Missing elderly man with heart failure wanted." The announcer said, "Federal Way police are asking for help in locating 71-year-old Whitmore Hampton, who disappeared last night from his daughter's home. The man suffers from heart failure and requires constant medication. Relatives fear he may have become lost due to age-related dementia." "Dementia?" I gasped in indignation. "I don't have dementia!" "Quiet." Garth turned up the volume. Lorraine appeared on the screen. She looked worried, her eyes red with tears. An actress, a bloody actress. "Daddy, if you see this, please call us or go to the police," she said in a trembling voice. "We're all very worried. You need to take your medication. You know how important that is." Floyd stood beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder in a gesture of support. His face expressed concern, but his eyes, eyes were cold and calculating. "Mr. Hampton recently suffered a microstroke," he added for the reporters. "Doctors have warned of possible memory and orientation problems. We just want him to come home safely." A microstroke? I nearly choked with indignation. That's a lie. I've never had a stroke. Garth turned off the TV and turned to me. "They're making history, Whitmore. If they find you, it'll look like you really are suffering from dementia and ran away from home in a state of confusion." I leaned back on the couch, stunned. They'd thought of everything. If I showed up and told them about my suspicions, who would believe me? A man who, according to his family, is suffering from dementia after a microstroke. "They're turning me into a crazy old man," I whispered. "So no one will believe my words." Garth nodded grimly. "And they do it quite skillfully. Lorraine's a nurse, and her word carries weight. If she says you've got dementia, people will believe her over me," I finished his thought. "Garth, what do I do?" He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "We need proof, Whitmore. Irrefutable proof of their intentions. Without it, you're really going to look like a paranoid old man." "But how? How can I prove something I overheard by accident?" Garth didn't have time to answer. The doorbell rang and we both flinched. A lightning bolt of fear struck me. Had they already found me? "Sit tight," Garth whispered, rising. "I'll see who it is." He went out into the hallway and I froze on the couch listening. My heart was pounding like crazy again. If it's the police, if it's Lorraine and Floyd. I heard the front door open, then a man's voice, unfamiliar. Garth answered quietly, but I couldn't make out the words. A moment later the door closed and Garth came back into the living room holding a piece of paper. "Police," he said, handing it to me. "They're putting out an APB on you. They want to know if I've seen you." I took it. My own face was staring back at me. It was the same picture as on the news. At the bottom, a police phone number and the words, "Suffering from heart failure and dementia, in need of medical attention." "What did you tell them?" I asked, feeling my insides grow cold. "That I hadn't seen you, of course." Garth sat down next to me. "But they're going around the neighborhood. Sooner or later they might come back with a search warrant, especially if Lorraine remembers that we were neighbors." I clutched the sheet in my hand, feeling desperation set in. Then I was trapped. If I go outside, I'll be recognized. If I stay here, I risk letting you down. Garth put his hand on my shoulder. "We'll figure something out, Whitmore. But without proof. I'm afraid no one will believe your story. Not against the word of the nurse and her husband. Not when they've already created an image of an elderly man with dementia." I nodded, realizing the bitter truth of his words. Without proof, I was just a crazy old man who ran away from home. And no one, absolutely no one, would believe that my own daughter was planning my murder. On my third day at Garth's, I realized I could no longer hide like a frightened rabbit. The police continued their search. My face was on the news, and the story of the old man with dementia was growing. Lorraine gave interviews, talking about my supposed memory problems, how I sometimes didn't recognize my grandchildren, my unfounded suspicions. She seemed so genuinely concerned that I began to question my own sanity. "I have to get back to my house," I told Garth at breakfast, pushing my plate of oatmeal away with determination. Garth raised his eyebrows, not letting go of the coffee cup. "Are you out of your mind? They're probably watching your house. The first place they'll look." "I don't think so," I shook my head. "Lorraine thinks I'm too weak to get there on my own. She thinks I've either found shelter with some random do-gooder or—" I didn't finish, but we both knew. "Or already dead of a heart attack in an alley somewhere." "Still, the risk is too great," Garth was adamant. "What were you looking for?" "IDs," I answered. "The house, the bank account, and some personal items. If I'm going to prove their intentions, I need to make sure my house is safe." Garth sighed, acknowledging my point. Over the days, he'd finally come to believe my story. especially after we'd heard the new version of why I'd disappeared. I'd been paranoid, refusing to take my medication, and on the eve of my escape, accusing Lorraine of putting poison in it. "Maybe we should see a lawyer," Garth suggested. "Tell him your story, show him the deed to the house." "Without proof, a lawyer won't help," I shook my head. "We need to find something concrete first. A recording of their conversation, evidence." Garth rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Could there be security cameras in your house? Or maybe at your neighbor's?" I shook my head. "No, I've never installed any. And neighbors, I doubt their cameras are pointed at my house." We were silent for a moment, considering our options. Finally, Garth said, "Okay, let's say you go, but not alone. I'll go with you and wait outside. If anything goes wrong, I'll step in." I nodded gratefully. Garth was a true friend. At 73, he was still strong and energetic from years of construction work and regular trips to the pool. Unlike me, with my heart condition and arthritis. We decided to go in the evening when it was dark. Less chance of anyone recognizing me. Garth lent me a baseball cap and an old jacket, a rudimentary disguise, but better than nothing. The day dragged agonizingly slow. I was nervous, checking my pulse often, afraid that my heart might fail at the worst possible moment. Before leaving, I took all the necessary medications and put some spare pills in my pocket, just in case. At 7 o'clock that evening, we got into Garth's old Ford. I pulled my baseball cap low over my eyes and squirmed in the passenger seat. My house was 20 minutes away, a quiet neighborhood of neat, one-story houses where Elizabeth and I had lived most of our lives. "Remember," Garth said, turning down my street, "you go in, get what you need, and get right out. No sentimental walks through rooms, no delays. If you see a light or Floyd's car, you leave right away. I'll be waiting around the corner." I nodded, though inside I was shrinking with fear. What if they really are watching the house? What if the police are patrolling the neighborhood? But it was too late to back out. Garth stopped the car a block before my house. I took a deep breath, gathering my strength. "Good luck," Garth said, squeezing my shoulder. "I'll wait here for 30 minutes. If you don't come back, I'll follow you." I got out of the car, feeling the February chill immediately. My house was visible at the end of the street, dark windows, no signs of presence. I walked slowly, trying not to attract attention, even though the street was deserted. It was a typical weekday evening. Everyone was home, eating dinner, watching TV. As I approached the house, I stood still for a second, looking at the familiar facade. This is where my life has been. This is where I was happy with Elizabeth. This is where Lorraine grew up. And here she had chosen to betray me. I still had the key, a little secret Lorraine didn't know about. She thought she'd taken all the keys when she moved me in with her. But I always kept a spare in a stash in the backyard, under the false bottom of the old birdhouse I'd made for Lorraine when she was a child. I walked around the back of the house, fumbled in the darkness for the birdhouse, pulled out the key. My hands trembled as I slid it into the back door lock. A quiet click and I was inside. The house smelled musty and dusty, 6 months without airing, without life. I moved cautiously, keeping the lights off, navigating by memory. I made my way through the kitchen to my study where a desk drawer held all the important papers. The moonlight streaming in through the unshaded window provided ample illumination. I opened the desk drawer and started going through the folders. House papers, insurance, bank statements. Everything was in place. I was putting the papers into the bag I'd brought with me when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, listening. A car door slammed, then a second one. Voices. I recognized them immediately. Lorraine and Floyd. Panic came over me in a cold wave. They're here. I looked around for cover. There was nowhere to hide in the office. We'd have to get out the back door before they came in. Too late. The key turned in the front door lock. A flick of the switch and light flooded the hallway, a strip of it visible from under the study door. "It's all covered in dust," Lorraine's voice sounded annoyed. We'll have to hire a cleaning service before we show the house to the buyers. We'll have to get rid of the junk first, Floyd replied. All that old furniture, books, who needs it? I squirmed at the table, barely breathing. They were talking about selling the house like I was already dead, like I never existed. The realtor said it's in a good neighborhood, and it might be worth more than we thought, Lorraine continued, especially if we do some cosmetic repairs. We don't need a makeover, Floyd objected. There's no time. The bank gave us a final warning. 1 more month of delinquency and we'll be in foreclosure. I know. Lorraine sounded tired. Damn loans. I never would have agreed to that boat if I'd known. Hey, you wanted the boat, Floyd was indignant. Like the Jenkinses, only better, you said. What about a car? A vacation in the Maldives? Did I want all that too? We both wanted that, Floyd's voice softened. And we can still have it. We just have to solve the problem with your father. There was silence. I could hear their footsteps. They moved around the house, peering into rooms, closer and farther away. I sat huddled in a corner, praying to all the saints that they wouldn't come into the study. Did you see the news? Lorraine asked. No sign of him. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. Maybe he did, replied Floyd grimly. At his age, with his heart on the street on a February night. You know what I mean. Don't say that. Lorraine's voice trembled. He's my father, Floyd. The father you were ready to send to the grave with your own hands, Floyd said. Don't play the caring daughter, Lori. We both know you never liked him much. It's different, Lorraine said quietly. A controlled situation is one thing. I'd do it gently, painlessly. It's quite another to think that he might be freezing or starving somewhere, or already lying there. That's enough, Floyd cut her off. We need to think about the future, how to save our home, our lives. Missing is missing, even better. No messing around with counterfeit drugs. What if he's found? I could hear the fear in Lorraine's voice. What if he told someone he heard us talking? Who? Floyd grinned. He doesn't have any friends. All his old buddies are in the grave. And if he did go to the police, who'd believe him? A nurse, 20 years of experience, a model mother, a caring daughter versus a dementia-ridden old man out of his mind. He doesn't have dementia, Lorraine said quietly. The police don't know that, Floyd's voice sounded smug, and neither do the doctors, and the medical records can be tweaked. You have access. Lorraine sighed. Okay, let's go through the rest of the rooms. We need to make a list of what can be thrown away and what can be sold. Their footsteps approached the study door. I froze, out of breath. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like they should hear it pounding. The doorknob turned and light from the hallway streamed into the room. I huddled in the corner behind the desk, praying to all the gods that they wouldn't see me. There's a lot of paperwork here, Lorraine said, turning on the office light. I'll have to sort through it all. That's some other time, Floyd replied. It's getting late. Let's finish looking around and go home. I have a 6 a.m. flight tomorrow. Okay, Lorraine turned off the light and closed the door. I exhaled, feeling cold sweat running down my forehead. They hadn't noticed the open desk drawer, hadn't noticed me in the corner. Too superficial an inspection, just estimating the amount of work to be done in the future. Their voices began to drift away. They were discussing what to do with the furniture, what price to ask for the house, who to hire to clean it. They were talking about all of this so casually, as if it wasn't about my house or my life. 15 minutes later, I heard the front door slam, then the sound of a car pulling away. Only then did I allow myself to stand up, stretching my stiff legs. I was lucky, incredibly lucky, but I knew it wouldn't happen again. Next time they might do a more thorough search of the house. Or worse, start moving things out. I had to act fast. I finished gathering my papers, added some photos of Elizabeth, our marriage certificate, her last letter to me to my bag. Personal items I didn't want to leave to Lorraine and Floyd. As I was about to leave, I noticed an old electronics box on the shelf. I opened it out of curiosity. Inside was a tape recorder I'd used years ago to record my notes. Compact with cassettes. An antique by today's standards, but probably still working. I picked up the recorder, checked the batteries. The device came to life, the red recording light flashing as the button was pressed. It works. There were spare tapes in the box, too. The idea came suddenly. If I could record them talking about their murder plans, if I can get a confession on tape, that would be proof, irrefutable proof of their intentions. I put the tape recorder and the tapes in my bag. I don't know exactly how I'll use it, but the very possibility of recording their words gave me hope, a small chance against their lies and manipulations. Before leaving, I took one more look around the house, probably for the last time. Every room held memories. The bedroom where Elizabeth and I slept, the living room where we celebrated Lorraine's birthdays, the kitchen where we made pancakes as a family on weekends, how it's all changed, how everything had fallen apart. I went out the back door, locking it carefully behind me. Put the key back in the stash, it might still come in handy. Then, looking around, I hurried to where Garth was waiting for me. He was visibly nervous when he saw me. "You're late. I was about to follow you." "Lorraine and Floyd were coming," I answered, climbing into the car. "I had to hide." Garth's eyes widened. "And they didn't see you?" "No," I shook my head. "They were just looking at the house, planning the sale. They're sure I've either run far away or I'm already dead." Garth shook his head, starting the car. "What kind of people? Their own family." "Family?" I grinned bitterly. "You know what I realized, Garth? Family isn't blood. Family is the people who care about you, who will never betray you." He nodded silently, pulling out onto the main road. We were both thinking the same thing, how often the closest people are the most dangerous, and how the loneliness of old age makes us vulnerable to their betrayal. "What are you going to do next?" Garth asked when we were halfway to his house. I took the tape recorder out of my bag. "I found it in the study. It's old, but it works. If I can record their confession—" Garth whistled. "That's not a bad idea. But how are you going to do it? Go back to their house?" I wondered. The plan was risky, almost insane, but I couldn't see any other way. "Yes," I said at last. "I'd go home. I'll pretend I've lost my memory, that I don't remember how or why I left. They'll believe it. It fits their story about my dementia." "It's too dangerous," Garth objected. "What if they try you right away?" "They won't," I shook my head. "Not right away. They'll be careful. There's been too much attention on our family since I disappeared. They'll wait until things calm down. In the meantime, I'll try to record their conversation." Garth shook his head disapprovingly, but didn't argue. He realized I didn't have much choice. Without proof, I was just a runaway old man with presumed dementia, and with a recording of their confession, with the tape, I'd have a chance. We drove back to Garth's house and spent the rest of the evening working out a plan, how I would contact Lorraine, what I would say about my disappearance, how I would hide the tape recorder, where I'd keep it so they wouldn't find it. It was a risky plan, but it was the only way to protect myself and my home. The only way to prove that I wasn't a senile old man out of my mind, but a victim of my own children's greed. As I fell asleep that night, I thought of Elizabeth. What would she say if she knew what our daughter had become? What would she do in my shoes? The answer was obvious. Elizabeth had always fought for justice. She wouldn't give up, wouldn't let them win, and neither would I. For Elizabeth's memory, for myself. To prove that old age does not make a man helpless and powerless. Even with a bad heart, one can find the strength to fight when one's life is at stake. The next morning began with preparations. Garth helped me check the recorder. We recorded a test message, listened to it, made sure the quality was acceptable. Then we discussed where I would hide it. "Pockets don't work," Garth reasoned. "It's too conspicuous. and if they suspect anything, they'll check them first. I nodded, going over my options in my mind. Finally, a decision came. I usually wear the vest under my shirt, I said. You could sew an inside pocket into it. The recorder's small, so it wouldn't be noticeable. Garth chuckled approvingly. His late wife used to sew, and he still had needles and thread. The old vest I'd worn under my shirt for warmth now had a secret pocket between the lining and the outer fabric. The recorder fit perfectly into it. Now the key is to remember to turn it on and off at the right moments, Garth reminded me, and change the tapes. I nodded. We decided that I would hide the tapes in the shoebox where I kept my old photographs. Lorraine had never been interested in that box, thinking it was just the junk of a sentimental old man. Then came the most difficult part, Lorraine's phone call. Garth and I rehearsed for a long time what I would say. The story had to sound convincing, to fit in with their version of my supposed dementia. I dialed my daughter's number from Garth's phone. She answered after the first beep, as if she'd been sitting with the phone in her hands, waiting for a call. "Hello?" Her voice sounded strained. "Lorraine, it's Daddy," I said, trying to make my voice sound tired and weak. "Daddy!" she exclaimed with such convincing relief that I almost believed her sincerity. "Lord, where are you? We're going crazy with worry." I don't know how to explain," I paused as Garth and I had agreed. "I got sick in the night. I went out for air and I don't remember anything. I woke up at a bus stop. Some woman helped me, took me to her house." "Daddy," Lorraine's voice had a hint of professional nurse's concern in it. "Did you have an episode? A microstroke, maybe? Do you remember who you are? Where you live?" "Of course I remember." I tried to add irritation to my voice. "I'm not out of my mind, Lorraine. It's just, I don't know what came over me. I felt like I had to run, that I was in danger." "It's called a paranoid episode, Dad." Her voice became soft, soothing. "It happens in the elderly." The doctor had warned of possible complications. I swallowed the angry reply. She lied so easily, so skillfully weaved her lies into the conversation, that an outsider would never have suspected deception. "You're probably right," I replied humbly. "I want to go home, Lorraine. I'm tired." "Of course, Daddy." Her voice warmed with relief. "Tell me where you are now, and Floyd and I will come and get you right away." "No," I tried to keep my voice firm. "I'll get there myself. I need to, get my head together. I'll be there for dinner." "But Dad." "Please, Lorraine," I added a pleading note to my voice. "I need to do this on my own, to prove to myself that I can still do something." A pause. I could almost see her weighing her options. Going after me meant getting me back under control faster, but refusing could look suspicious. What caring daughter wouldn't rush right after her missing father? "Okay," she finally said. "But be careful, and call me if you don't feel well. Promise." "I promise." I tried to make my voice sound grateful. "Thank you, Lorraine." After the call, Garth looked at me anxiously. "Are you sure you're up to this? It's a dangerous game, Whitmore." "I have no choice," I replied, taking off my vest to check the fit of the recorder. "Without proof, no one will believe me. I have to get a recording of their conversation." Garth sighed, but didn't argue. Instead, he handed me a small cell phone, an old cot he hardly ever used. "Call me anytime," he said, "and if I don't hear from you in 3 days, I'll go to the police." I nodded, tucking the phone into my pants pocket. We agreed that we'd keep in touch whenever I left the house, for example, to get the mail or the newspaper. Lorraine couldn't know about our contact. After lunch, Garth drove me to a bus stop not far from Lorraine's house. We agreed that I would get there on my own. It would look more believable that way. "Be careful," Garth said, shaking my hand firmly. "And remember, if you feel threatened, leave now. The house and the money aren't worth your life." I nodded, though deep down I knew it wasn't about the house or the money anymore. It was about justice. It was about not letting them win, not letting them turn me into an unwilling victim. The drive to Lorraine's house took about 20 minutes. With each step, the anxiety grew. What if they suspected something? What if they decided to act faster than I thought? Before turning onto their street, I stopped, took a deep breath, and turned on my voice recorder. The first entry is my return. There's no telling what they'll say when they see me. The front door opened barely as I rang the bell. Lorraine was standing on the threshold, and her face reflected a whole range of emotions: relief, concern, and something else. Disappointment? Daddy! She hugged me with such convincing joy that an outsider would have been moved to tears. Thank God you're back. We were so worried. I hugged her back, feeling my whole body tense up. This woman, who was now cradling me in her arms, had discussed ways to kill me only a week ago. I'm sorry for making you worry, I mumbled as I walked into the house. Floyd sat in the living room, rising at my appearance. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome back, Whitmore," he said, shaking my hand. "You look tired. Tough week, huh?" I nodded, feigning embarrassment. I don't remember everything, to be honest. It's all a blur. Lorraine and Floyd exchanged quick glances. I could almost see the plan forming in their heads to support the memory lapse theory, to use it. "It's okay, Dad," Lorraine said softly, settling me into the chair. "The important thing is that you're safe and sound. Are you hungry? I'll heat up dinner." "A little," I answered, trying to look weak and confused. "And I need to take my medicine. I think I've missed a few appointments." "Of course," Lorraine nodded with professional concern. "I'll get everything right away. You need to get your regimen back on track. It's very important for your heart." She left for the kitchen, and Floyd sat across from me, studying my face. "You scared us, old man," he said with feigned cordiality. Lorraine almost went crazy with worry. "We even went to the police." "Yes, I saw the news," I replied cautiously. "I'm sorry to bother you." Floyd leaned closer. "You really don't remember why you left?" There was something akin to suspicion in his voice. I lowered my eyes as if trying to remember. Vaguely. I felt like I was in danger, that I should run. It must have been a nightmare, and I wasn't fully awake. Floyd leaned back on the couch, visibly relaxed. "It happens," he nodded, "especially at your age. Thank God it was all right. Where have you been all this time?" I told a prepared story about a kind woman who found me at the bus stop and took me in, about how my memory was slowly coming back, about how I decided to return home when I saw the news of my disappearance. Lorraine returned with a tray containing a bowl of soup and a glass of water. Next to it were my pills, neatly organized into small plastic containers. "Here, Dad," she said, setting the tray on the table next to me. "Eat and take your medicine. You need to regain your strength." I looked at the pills with an internal shudder. What if she'd already put something in them? What if she'd decided to act now? "Thank you," I mumbled, taking the spoon. "You're very thoughtful." Lorraine smiled with the professional warmth of a nurse. "I called Dr. Mitchell," she said. "He wants to examine you tomorrow. Make sure everything's okay." I nodded, slowly eating my soup. I didn't touch the pills yet, thinking about what to do. Throw them away? Substitute? Take them at the risk of my life? "I think I'll take them after I eat," I said. "I'd like to take them after I eat," I said, so I wouldn't feel heavy in my stomach. Lorraine nodded, apparently not suspecting a trick. "Sure, Daddy. Just don't forget, okay?" After dinner, I said I wanted to rest. Lorraine walked me to my room, carefully adjusted my pillow, pulled the curtains. "Rest, Daddy," she said, kissing my forehead. "I'm so glad you're back." When she left, I quietly turned off the recorder. The first recording was done. Nothing particularly incriminating, but it's a start. The important thing is that they seem to believe my story about the memory lapse. I discreetly threw the pills down the toilet when I went to the bathroom. It wasn't worth the risk. I had some spare ones in my bag that I'd brought with me, the ones Garth had given me from his own supply. That's what I took instead of the ones Lorraine had given me. The next 2 days passed in tense anticipation. I played the part of a frail, somewhat confused old man. Lorraine supervised my medication, but I learned to hide the pills in my fist and then throw them away. I took the ones I'd brought with me instead. The visit to Dr. Mitchell was uneventful. He found me in satisfactory condition, considering the circumstances, and prescribed a sedative to prevent further episodes. Lorraine listened carefully to all his recommendations, like a model daughter and nurse. On the 3rd day after my return, luck smiled on me. I was taking an afternoon nap in my room when I heard Floyd come home earlier than usual. He and Lorraine were talking in the kitchen, unaware that I was awake. I quietly turned on the recorder and opened the door ajar so I could hear better. "Did you get it?" Lorraine's voice sounded muffled. "Yes," Floyd answered. "Your colleague didn't ask any questions." "No. I told him it was for a terminal cancer patient. He's an understanding guy." I tensed, listening to every word. They were talking about a drug, the one they were going to kill me with. "When do we start?" Floyd asked. Time was running out and the bills were mounting. "We have to wait a little longer," Lorraine's voice sounded worried. "It's too risky right after his return." Everyone still remembers the disappearance story. "How long? A week? 2? The bank won't wait forever, Lori." "I know." There was irritation in her voice. "You think I like this? He's my father, damn it." "Who left you and your mom when you were a kid?" Floyd reminded her. "Who missed your graduation because of work? Who's done nothing but criticize you your whole life?" "It doesn't matter," Lorraine replied quietly. "Murder is murder." "Not murder, but euthanasia," Floyd objected. "He's an old, sick man. We'll just hasten the inevitable and solve our problems." There was silence. I pictured Lorraine struggling with the remnants of her conscience, Floyd staring at her, waiting for a decision. "Okay," she said at last. "In a week. We'll start with low doses in his evening medication. We'll gradually increase. It'll look like a natural progression." "What if he runs away again?" Floyd sounded worried. "What if he suspects something?" "He won't," Lorraine replied confidently. "You've seen his condition. He's weak, confused. He probably doesn't remember hearing our conversation, if he heard it at all. Maybe he was just dreaming and that's why he ran away." I clenched my fists, holding back my anger. They were talking about me like I was weak, like I was a thing to be gotten rid of. And my own daughter was ready to slowly poison me, watching me fade away day by day. "Let me see," Lorraine said. There was a rustle of packaging. "Yes, that's it. That's great. I'll hide it in our bedroom, in the medicine cabinet. He never looks in there." "Make sure the kids don't find it either," Floyd warned. "Paige likes to go through your makeup." "I'll keep it safe," Lorraine promised, "behind the secret panel where I keep my expensive jewelry." Their voices began to drift away. They must have gone into the bedroom. I closed the door quietly and turned off the recorder. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to jump out of my chest. But it wasn't just fear I felt. I felt triumph. I had the tape, proof of their intentions. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I quietly snuck into the bathroom where I kept the empty containers of my medication. I poured in the pills I'd brought from Garth. They looked like my regular meds. Now, if Lorraine starts putting something in my pills, I'll still take the safe ones. The next morning, as usual, Lorraine brought me breakfast and my medication. I noticed how carefully she made sure I swallowed all the pills. She'd never been so insistent before. "Is everything okay, Daddy?" she asked with professional concern. "You look a little pale today." "My heart hurts a little," I replied, which was true. The stress of the last few days had taken its toll on my health. "But that's okay. If it gets worse, just let me know." Lorraine put her hand on my shoulder. "Promise?" I nodded, looking into her eyes. What was she feeling at that moment? Caring? Guilt? Or just impatience? When would the drug take effect? After a few days, I noticed that I was actually getting worse. Even though I wasn't taking the poisoned medication, my heart was failing more and more often. The stress, the constant tension, the fear, all of it was undermining my health. That evening I sat in the living room, pretending to watch TV while actually recording another conversation between Lorraine and Floyd in the kitchen. They were discussing that I was responding well to a new drug. That's what they called the poison amongst themselves. Suddenly, something in my chest clenched. A sharp pain pierced my left side, radiating to my arm and jaw. I gasped, dropping the TV remote. My eyes blurred into black spots. "Daddy?" Lorraine came out of the kitchen when she heard the noise. "Daddy!" She rushed over to me, expertly probing for a pulse. I could see the panic in her eyes, not because of my condition, but because her plan might be revealed. If I died too quickly, if the autopsy showed unusual drugs in my blood— "Floyd!" she yelled. "Call an ambulance! Dad's having a heart attack!" Floyd appeared in the doorway, a look of confusion on his face. "Are you sure? Maybe." "Call an ambulance!" she shouted, unbuttoning my shirt. "Now!" While Floyd made the call, Lorraine laid me on the couch and put a pillow under my head. "Hang in there, Dad," she said, pulling nitroglycerin out of her pocket. "Here, put it under your tongue. The ambulance is on its way." I looked into her eyes, trying to figure out if she was saving me out of fear of exposure, or if she had some remnants of daughterly love in her. It didn't matter at that moment. What mattered was that she was doing the right thing, like a professional nurse. The nitroglycerin pill was starting to work and the pain had receded a little, but I could feel that this attack was more serious than the previous ones. My heart was racing and every breath I took was labored. "Breathe slowly, Dad," Lorraine said, holding my hand. "The ambulance will be here in 5 minutes." I tried to focus on my breathing, fighting the panic that was building. To die now, when I'm so close to exposing their plan. When I have proof, but haven't had time to use it yet? Through the haze of pain, I saw Floyd pacing nervously around the room, casting concerned glances at Lorraine and me. "It wasn't because of—" he began, but Lorraine cut him off abruptly. "Not now." There was such steel in her voice that Floyd was silent immediately. I realized what he wanted to ask, if it was their drug that had caused me to have the seizure. Apparently they were planning a slower action, a more gradual deterioration. The sound of an ambulance siren interrupted my thoughts. A minute later, paramedics entered the room with stretchers and equipment. Lorraine immediately switched into professional nurse mode, clearly reporting my condition, symptoms, and medical history. "The cardiogram confirms a heart attack," one of the paramedics said, looking at the portable monitor. "I need to be hospitalized immediately." I was quickly transferred to a stretcher, hooked up to oxygen, and put on an IV. Everything happened in a blur. I saw Lorraine's concerned face, Floyd's tense face. I could see the same question in their eyes. Would I survive? And if I did, what would happen next? "I'll go with you," Lorraine told the paramedics. "I'm a nurse. I know his medical history." They nodded, letting her into the ambulance. The last thing I saw before the doors closed was Floyd's face, confused, scared. He clearly hadn't expected this turn of events. In the car, Lorraine held my hand, speaking soothing words. The professional mask didn't fall off her face for a second. To the paramedics, she was just a caring nurse daughter worried about her father. "It's going to be okay, Daddy," she repeated. "We're almost at the hospital. The doctors will take care of you." I looked at her through the fog of pain and wondered, does she know I recorded their conversations? Does she suspect I remember everything and never had dementia? And what would happen when we were alone in the hospital room? The ambulance raced through the nighttime streets of Federal Way, taking me from one danger to perhaps another. But I was still alive. And as long as I was alive, I had a chance to expose their plan and protect myself. The hospital room with its sterile whiteness became my refuge for 2 weeks. The heart attack was serious enough to keep me under observation, but not serious enough to require surgery. The doctors called it a warning bell and insisted on complete rest. Lorraine spent hours at my bedside, showing exemplary filial care. She brought fruit, fresh magazines, monitored my medications. The nursing staff admired her devotion, unaware of the dark motives behind that flawless mask. "You need more rest," she told me with professional concern. "Dr. Ramirez said it would take time to recover." I nodded, playing the grateful patient. But the whole time she was around, I felt an unaccountable fear. What if she decided to speed up the process? It would be even easier in the hospital where, as a nurse, she had access to various drugs than at home. Floyd visited me less often. His job as a school bus driver didn't leave much free time, as he explained. But I could see the impatience and irritation in his eyes. My recovery was not part of their plans. My salvation was Garth, who showed up on my 3rd day in the hospital with a fruit basket and a crossword puzzle book. An old friend. I introduced him to Lorraine, who was in the room. We'd lived next door for years. Lorraine smiled at Garth with the smile of duty, but there was suspicion in her eyes. "It's a pleasure," she said. "Papa never mentioned you. Old people always forget things." Garth grinned good-naturedly. "How are you doing, Whitmore? You look lousy, but you're alive." His casual tone diffused the tension. Lorraine left soon after, citing business, and Garth and I were alone. "Did you get it?" he asked quietly, leaning toward me. I nodded and pointed to the nightstand where my clothes were. In the inside pocket of my vest, 3 tapes. They planned to slowly poison me by slipping something into my medication. Floyd had already gotten the drug. Garth whistled. "Those bastards. What now?" "Take the tapes," I whispered. "Keep them in a safe place. I'll see a lawyer when I get out of here. But if anything happens to me before then—" "Nothing will happen to you," Garth said firmly. "I'll be here every day, and they won't put anything in your food or medicine while I'm here." He was true to his word. Garth appeared in the room at different times each day, often taking Lorraine by surprise. Their strained politeness to each other concealed a growing dislike. Lorraine clearly didn't like the fact that her father suddenly had such a loyal friend. During my 2nd week in the hospital, Garth brought in a distinguished-looking middle-aged man. "This is Harris Fenton," he introduced him. "My lawyer. I've been cleaning up my inheritance affairs, and I thought you could use some advice. I knew what he was up to right away. Lorraine was out, so we could talk freely." "Mr. Hampton," Fenton said seriously as Garth closed the door of the room, "I am aware of your situation. Garth told me of your suspicions and showed me the tapes. If what's on them is true, you have grounds for serious legal action." "It's true," I said firmly. "My daughter and her husband planned my death in order to take possession of my house. I have tapes of their conversations." Fenton nodded, making notes in his notebook. "We need to proceed with caution. If your daughter is indeed involved in the attempted murder, she may try to destroy the evidence or accelerate her plan when she realizes you know something." "What are you suggesting?" I asked. "First, I've already given copies of the recordings to a detective I know," Fenton replied. "The police have begun a discreet investigation. Second, we'll change your legal situation. Right now, I suggest you make a new will where you explicitly state that in the event of your death under suspicious circumstances, there should be a thorough investigation." "Lorraine will find out about it," I objected. "She's checking all my mail, all my papers." "She won't," Fenton said firmly. "The will be kept in my safe. A copy will be kept at the notary's. No papers will be sent to your house." It was a good plan. That same day, I signed a new will disinheriting Lorraine in favor of a local charity for the elderly. Fenton also helped me draw up a power of attorney for Garth, authorizing him to act on my behalf in the event of my incapacity. "Now we need hard evidence," Fenton said before leaving. "The recordings are good, but the defense could argue they were made out of context or even fabricated. We need to catch them red-handed." "How?" I asked, feeling my heart clench at the thought of going back to Lorraine's house. "Detective Reynolds has a plan," Fenton replied. "He'll contact you after you're discharged, but be prepared to play bait." 2 weeks later, the doctors finally allowed me to go home. Lorraine was a model of caring, helping me pack, listening carefully to the doctor's recommendations. "You need complete rest, Dad," she said as she helped me into the car. "No stress, no exercise." "I know," I replied obediently. "Thank you for your concern, Lorraine." A warm welcome was waiting for me at home. Floyd even took the day off to meet his dear father-in-law. Paige and Derek drew a get-well card, probably at their mother's insistence. "We're so glad you're back, Dad," Lorraine said as she made me comfortable in the bedroom. "Everything's going to be okay now." I smiled and thanked, but inwardly I was tense as a string. In the house where they were planning my death, I felt like I was in a den of predators. That evening, when everyone had gone to bed, I quietly called Garth from the cell phone he'd secretly given me at the hospital. "I'm here," I whispered. "What's next?" "Detective Reynolds wants to meet tomorrow," Garth answered. "I'll pick you up ostensibly to check on you and take you to him." And so it happened. The next day, Garth showed up with another fruit basket and offered to take a ride to unwind. Lorraine objected at first, citing doctor's orders, but I insisted. Detective Reynolds turned out to be a sturdy middle-aged man with shrewd eyes. We met at an unremarkable cafe on the outskirts of town. "Mr. Hampton," he said after a brief introduction, "I've listened to your tapes. If everything on them is true, your daughter and her husband have committed a serious crime, an attempted murder." "It's true," I said firmly. "Every word of it." Reynolds nodded. "We've conducted a preliminary investigation. Your daughter did take drugs from the hospital that are not part of her normal practice. Her financial situation is really critical. She and her husband owe a large amount of money to the bank and have been warned about possible foreclosure on the house." I clenched my hands into fists. It was one thing to suspect, and quite another to get confirmation from the police. "What now?" I asked. "We need to catch them red-handed," Reynolds replied. "Records are good to start an investigation, but we need more solid evidence for a trial. We propose a decoy operation." He outlined the plan. I was to return home and continue to play the role of a frail, sick old man. Meanwhile, the police will set up hidden cameras and microphones in the house. When Lorraine or Floyd tried to put something in my medication, they would be arrested on the spot. "That's dangerous," Garth pointed out. "What if they decide to act sooner than you expect?" "Mr. Hampton will have an emergency button," Reynolds replied, showing a small device that looked like a keychain. "One press and the extraction team will be in place within 2 minutes. In addition, we'll monitor the situation around the clock." It was a risky plan, but I didn't see any other way out. We agreed that the police would install the equipment the next day, when Lorraine would be at work and Floyd would take the kids to school. On the 4th day after the equipment was installed, everything changed. Floyd took the children to his mother's house early in the morning for the weekend. Lorraine took the day off work, saying she wanted to spend the day with her father. "How are you feeling, Daddy?" she asked, sitting down on the edge of my bed with a cup of tea in her hands. "A little better," I answered, watching her hands carefully. "But still weak." She nodded with professional understanding. "It's normal after a heart attack. Recovery takes time. I brought your morning medication." She handed me a glass of water and a handful of pills. I noticed that among the familiar capsules was one new one, small, white, unlabeled. "What's that?" I asked, pointing to it. "A new drug." Lorraine tensed slightly, but the smile remained in place. "Yes. Dr. Ramirez prescribed an additional heart medication. I forgot to tell you yesterday." That's a lie. Dr. Ramirez didn't prescribe anything new. I knew that for a fact because Reynolds checked all my medical appointments. That's odd, I said, pretending to try to remember. He hadn't said anything about it when I was at his appointment. He called me yesterday, Lorraine answered quickly. It's standard practice for patients after a heart attack. I nodded, pretending to believe it. I discreetly pressed the emergency button in my robe pocket. The extraction team should have arrived within 2 minutes. I just needed to stall for time. You know, I said, looking at the pills in my palm, I keep thinking about our house, about where we lived with your mom. Lorraine tensed even more. Yeah? What do you think? I think we should sell it, I said, watching her reaction. It's empty anyway. And the money? Well, money could help you and Floyd. I know you're having financial difficulties. Lorraine's eyes widened in surprise, then suspicion flickered in them. What makes you think we're having financial difficulties? I'm not blind, Lorraine, I said softly. I can see you and Floyd whispering about the accounts, how nervous you get when the mail comes in, and then those expensive things you buy. I know how much a nurse and a school bus driver make. You're living beyond your means. Take your medicine, Daddy, she said, changing the subject. They'll make you feel better. I stared at the pills in my palm. One of them could be deadly. My own daughter was giving me poison and looking into my eyes. Do you know what the saddest part is, Lorraine? I asked quietly. It's not that you want me dead. It's that you can't even wait for it to come naturally. Her face went pale. What are you saying, Dad? I don't understand. I heard everything, I continued, feeling the weight I'd been carrying around all these weeks let go. That night before I ran away, I heard you and Floyd discussing how to get rid of me, how you were going to put something in my medication, something that would give me a heart attack. Lorraine froze as if struck by thunder, the horror of recognition in her eyes. Do you remember everything? She whispered. But the doctor said, dementia. I never had dementia, Lorraine, I said firmly. It was your fiction, so that no one would believe what I said. A clever move, I must admit. At that moment, the front door burst open with a crash. Police officers in bulletproof vests, guns at the ready, burst into the room. Police, stay where you are, shouted an officer, pointing his gun at Lorraine. She froze, still holding the glass of water, her face contorted with shock and horror. What's going on? She whispered. Daddy, what have you done? What I had to do, I answered, feeling strangely calm, protected myself. The events of the next few weeks passed like a blur. The arrest of Floyd, who tried to flee when he learned of his wife's arrest. The preliminary hearing, where tapes of their conversations were presented. A chemical analysis that confirmed the white pill contained a lethal dose of digoxin, a drug that in large quantities can cause a heart attack. The trial was short. The evidence was overwhelming. Lorraine and Floyd received 15 years in prison each. Their children were placed in the custody of their grandmother, Floyd's mother. After the trial, I returned to my old house. I began renovations, gradually restoring it to its former coziness. Garth helped me, coming over almost every day. Physical work helped me not to think about the betrayal, about the trial, about my broken family. Letters from Lorraine came from prison. She apologized, said she was sorry, that she had rethought everything. I didn't read them. I sent them back immediately with the note, "The addressee refuses to accept correspondence." She tried to contact me through her lawyer, through social workers, even through Garth, but my decision was unwavering. No contact, no relationship. She stopped being my daughter the moment she planned my death. That day, exactly 1 year after the trial, I sat on the porch of my house watching the sunset. The air was warm, smelling of cut grass and the blooming roses Elizabeth had once planted along the walkway. The bitterness still lingered in me, but it didn't eat away at my soul like it had before. I had learned to live with it as one learns to live with a chronic illness. I knew I would never forgive Lorraine and Floyd, never let them back into my life. But I also knew I wouldn't let their betrayal define the rest of my life. I was free from their control, from their plans, from their presence. I lived in my own home, by my own rules, accountable to no one. And in that freedom was its own bitter joy, the joy of defeating those who thought I was too weak to defend myself. The joy of a man who had looked into the face of death and survived to tell his story.